What up, people? Welcome back to the Doing Everything Different podcast. I'm your host, and today we have a very, very special guest, Dwight White II. He is an incredible artist, entrepreneur, working on some really cool projects, and I'm super excited to have him on the show and kind of talk about his journey and process, career journey, and transition. So, Dwight, welcome to the show.
I appreciate you. Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to diving in. I'm excited to be here today.
For sure. Yeah, no, we appreciate you coming on. Yeah, really excited to just kind of talk about your journey. I've been checking out your work, and you're doing some incredible projects that have some amazing meaning behind them, and just some collaborating with some really dope companies and people. And so I just kind of wanted to take it back from the beginning and kind of where it all started from, where that kind of artist background came from. Was it something that was always in you, and how you kind of discovered that, and just kind of your process behind that?
Yeah, for sure. The beginning, I mean, I'm originally from Houston, Texas. So I think early on in my life, I was always intrigued by art. I always say like art's a way of seeing. Like some people see the world through art and creativity, and I would say I was one of those people kind of early on. But the practice of art didn't really come till later. I wasn't really super exposed to museums, didn't go to a lot of art exhibits or anything like that growing up. It just wasn't part of my life. I was very much so focused on sport, my journey with that and where the places I thought it could take me. And art came later on. It was like more of a therapeutic tool for me. I found it late adolescence, early adulthood, to where it felt freeing. It felt like something that was gave me another sense of purpose, and allowed me to communicate even during times where I didn't feel like communicating verbally. So, yeah.
That's dope. So you talked about sports being a big part of your kind of upbringing. Was that your first love?
Yeah, man, for sure. It was my first love. It was the first, uh, it was a bonding experience I had with my parents. They were both collegiate athletes. My pops played football in college. My mom played volleyball. So early on, I was just like, that was our thing in the household. We were all competitive. We battled out whether it was ping pong, little mini hoops, whatever. It didn't matter. Like anybody could get it in the house. So that was my life with sport. All sports. I mean, my first real love was football, then it transitioned to basketball. Then a brother stopped growing, and I was like, football seems like a greater opportunity these days. So yeah, sport was the first love.
That's dope. Did you have any siblings?
Yeah, I have a younger sibling, Kason. He was a great baseball player. His career just ended more recently, but he also played sport in college. Yeah.
That's dope.
Yeah.
So what was that experience like with football? You went to college for it?
Yeah. So I went to Northwestern University, which was a big leap, being from Texas. I think growing up, I thought about a lot of Big 12 schools and SEC schools that were down south. And then I took a visit to this incredible university just outside of Chicago, Northwestern, and kind of fell in love with the campus, the coaches, some of my, friends that were going to become teammates, and made that choice. And yeah, flew to the Chicagoland area to play ball.
That's dope. What position did you play?
Play corner.
Corner.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, so you was out there.
Oh yeah, I was out there trying to make sure we kept up and make plays. Yes. Arguably, I'm biased, but I would say it's the toughest skill position.
For sure, 100%.
Yeah.
100%. So what was that? How many years did you play in college?
I was going on my third season, and I got injured that year. Yeah. So I got injured my junior season. Yeah.
And so with that injury, you were kind of just like, all right, let me switch it up, or how did that impact you?
It was interesting, man, because I initially got injured in like a practice, and it wasn't career ending to me. It was just like okay, let's get it checked out. We'll heal up and be back out there. But I discovered some stuff about myself that I didn't know. My family didn't know. I was born with one kidney, and so I never injured this kidney before in my life, or really anything internal organ wise. But I re-injured that same kidney maybe 2 weeks later. which was so crazy. And I had like internal bleeding. So like it was a it was a weird decision because I went from not knowing this thing about myself to learning about it, and then a week later being like, "Oh, that's like life threatening," and I had no
Yeah.
idea. So I had to make a decision. It was less of a whether I could walk or run. It wasn't that type of injury. It was a if this happens again, it could be life threatening. So I had to hang it up for that reason, and that took a toll on me, just like emotionally, because it didn't all make sense. I'm like, I've been playing ball for 15 years. Like I don't. It's hard to process just like quitting, or hang. And that's how I saw it at the time. I felt like I was
Hmm.
quitting. I had to do a lot of work to realize it wasn't quitting; it was reshifting focus. But yeah, I think it was tough. It was a tough time for me.
How did you? Because that's a big. I mean, that's a big deal, right? That you talk about. You have this vision for your life and where you want to go with things, and then in such a short period of time, everything changes from that. You know,
Yeah.
I could feel that would be a really hard transition experience. How did you take it at first? Was it like confusing? Were you upset? Was it like an anger thing? Was it like a why me? How did that play out?
Yeah, man, it was tough because my life was so immersed in it. Like when you're a student athlete and you're in college, like I feel like your lifestyle is pretty specific to that. Like you spend half of your time at the facilities and training and practicing, and then obviously you go to class and whatnot. But then you're back at the facility studying film, doing all the things to make you the greatest possible player to have an opportunity to play at the next level. So for me, it was just like it was a matter of finding something to do with my brain and downtime, or like okay, I can
Hmm.
study more. All right, but I'm used to being up all day, being super productive. Like studying wouldn't even take that much time for me. So I was uh I was just lost. I was like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. My teammates were still getting up in the morning. I lived with all football players as well, so they would leave in the morning. I would go and just be like, oh, maybe I'll be a coach. I don't know. And then I realized, no, I don't like studying plays. I like studying plays to make plays, not studying plays
Hmm.
to tell somebody else to make them. So, so yeah, that didn't work out really. And then I just started exploring self, I guess. Yeah.
And this was during college, you started exploring like different just avenues and like different interests?
Yeah, during college, I would say not too long after it happened. Like I had some time period where I would describe it now as depressed, where I just
Hmm.
kind of just checked out at everything almost. Didn't know what to do with my time, but I would say a few months later, started recognizing that you only go to college once, you only have that opportunity once. I was also I was recently became part of a fraternity, Kappa Alpha Psi. I became president of that fraternity, Pole Mark, and then would get involved with a lot of different student organizations and like host events on campus and figure out ways to like just be more engaged. And then I would say personally, it's when the creativity piece stepped in, where I was like, I like doing this. I started teaching myself digital design, Photoshop, started making graphics for the football team, like just like interesting ways to stay busy and not alone in my basement or room. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Having community is important. So I know
for
joining a
sure.
fraternity, I know that probably helped a lot. How
Yeah.
did you was somebody into art? How did you like stumble on that? Like get into graphic design or that first little thing that sparked it?
Um, the first, I mean, like I said, like growing up, it was my way of so like I was always into art. I remember being like super young and like trying to I would impress like my young girlfriends with just like a little drawing, like Valentine's Day cards. This is an original design, you know what I mean? So I was always like doodling and like trying things. So I think for me, when I did go into depression and I did start thinking about how can I, shift gears a little bit. I just thought of things that like brought me joy. Like just that was it. It wasn't like man, now how do I pivot? Like, what's my career going to be now? It was more so just like, man, how do I get out of this position of sadness? And I was like,
Hmm.
art does that for me. It always has. So it was just me like reliving childhood at an older age.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's important. I think that just even from, I talk to a lot of people that are in their early 20s going through the college trying to figure out, or even just high school trying to figure out
Hmm.
their life in a transition. And I know that could be hard. I mean, it's such a tough age, right? At
Yeah,
that time, you're just trying to figure everything out. So it's like, how do you find what you're good at? And I always tell people you have to just test things out to see what you like in the beginning. Don't have it all kind of figured out and like, okay, I need to do X, Y, and Z. I think
yeah,
there's so much pressure on that.
exactly. And I think I mean, that's a good way to look at it. And also just a reminder for that segment or that age of people, like, it's okay to not know or to just be super intrigued by a lot of things and just
For sure.
exploring them. Yeah.
And having your identity wrapped up in things, right? Like one of my boys played pro ball for a while.
Yeah.
He was in NFL, and he was just talking about after, you know, playing after he was out of the league, it's like your whole identity is wrapped up in this. So you have to like create this like new identity, and
Yeah.
that becomes a challenging part of the kind of that depression that I think that you kind of spoke about, of just figuring out, okay, where's my path, and how am I gonna, you know, move to the next thing. And so
Yeah.
that's dope that you found art pretty, pretty quickly.
For sure. Yeah, and I mean, so like I said, like you said, I found it quickly, and then it was the next step was just like understanding that it can be my next identity. You know, because like to your point, identity that doesn't shift that quickly. Like I was still very much so Dwight, the student athlete, or Dwight, the football player, even to my peers on campus. So it was like this is awkward, but over time, I was like, dang, like this might be my identity. Like when I started creating and getting a response from it, and it was communicating something to other people, not just myself. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you said you started doing designs for the football team. So you were still able to take kind of your passion of what you love and incorporate it into that kind of world. How did you merge the two with that, and how did that play a part in kind of shaping
Yeah.
your path?
Um, I mean, it allowed me to stay connected, right? Like my community, my family away from home was the team, was the squad, was the faculty, the staff, some of the coach. You know what I mean? So for me, it was like, oh, there's this like hidden talent that like I only did in my room with like my girlfriend at the time, or like would play around with her photography, and we would like try things, right? Like to then expose this hidden craft of mine to my team. They all got really excited by it. They were like, yo, like that's nuts. We got to show coach. We got to show the PR team, the marketing team. And I'm like, all right, like whatever. And they showed them, and they're like, yo, like what? So that's how it all like started. And I started making graphics. Like some of my good friends would have like a breakout game in the Big Ten, and like they would need like a graphic for
Oh,
social and for TV or whatever, and I would just crank one out, and they'd be like, "Oh, dang! Like D White made that." So
that's tight.
that's how I stayed involved for a while. Yeah.
What was your major? Was it in any type of creative arts or anything like that?
No, I was in sociology and communications in undergrad, and then I did like a master's in integrated marketing.
That's
Yeah.
dope. That's dope.
Yeah.
Okay, so through college you started to, you had that big life shift, and then you kind of explored the identity with art and kind of got into that. How did that evolve and develop after college?
After college, it kind of remained a thing that it was starting to become my identity personally. And as I stayed in Chicago, so like I would go to art shows, I would do underground shows and live paint. Started playing around with mural making, all sorts of things. Um, that's kind of how it played out. And after school, but it wasn't a career yet. Only in my mind, it could be one. Everyone else saw it as a hobby or a cool passion or something I do on the side. Um, even friends and family, which I don't blame them. It was like they're like, okay, that's amazing and like that's cool, but like, all right, your career now you got to make money. So I was actually working in marketing. I started my career initially in sports marketing. Realized I didn't really need to work in the sports space, and so after grad school, I started at Kraft Heinz, which is like, Kraft mac and cheese, Heinz ketchup for reference. And I was working in brand management or consumer insights and marketing there. So that's where I started my career. I spent like first 4 years out of grad school there while I was doing art. So I was kind of doing them both full time, like work by day, art by night. Yeah.
That's dope. During that time, were you trying to figure out your style? Did you have your style of like your art of like, okay, I'm going to kind of play in this lane, or was it more of kind of you were experiencing or experimenting?
I mean, I was always naturally drawn to portrait work just because, like, I don't know, a lot of my works are based on real conversations with real people or based on self. And so I was naturally drawn to that because I felt like I was communicating stories through visual elements or through facial features, color, just a full composition. And I would say, like, to this day, my style is probably still evolving. Like, I didn't study art. Like, I don't have a specific I didn't have a specific approach to art for a long time. It was just what I felt. So and to this day that's kind of still what it is, except I recognize the importance of like building bodies of work and collections. So that's something I'm like still getting better at today.
Yeah, your work is amazing, man. I've just
Thank you.
seen the way that you have some people that study art and do all that stuff, and then you have some people that just naturally got that eye and gift, and those are things that I feel like you can't really teach.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I feel like you got this like really unique perspective of how you view stuff. So I think it's really dope.
I appreciate it, man. For real.
So you were at Craft for 4 years doing art on the side and working in the corporate the corporate world. What happened after the 4 years?
Literally just leaped. I just like couldn't I actually during those 4 years, so like probably after the second year, I just started trying to express my true value as a corporate worker. Like, hey, I'm creative. Hey, like some of the stuff we're doing with agencies, I could do in house. Hey, like, what if we switched my role into something more of this direction? Or what if I was building visual elements? And it was kind of just falling on deaf ears. Like, they were just like, hey, like, you're good at this. Like, keep, doing analytics, giving us analysis. And that was like, okay, well, after 2 more years of that, I was like, I can't do this because I feel like my purpose is elsewhere. And so eventually I just left after kind of asking over and over again how I could reposition myself in what I envision as a safer option. Like I was in corporate,
Mm-hmm.
I was like, it makes sense to try and make what I love work in this safer environment, but I wasn't gonna get that, at least not anytime soon. So yeah, I just completely left. I was wrapping up a mural project at the time. At the same time, like I said, I would work on art outside of work hours, go to work, whether it was morning, night, whatever. And I was just like, I'm gonna just wrap up this mural. And like in my mind, I'd already thought strategically enough for years around how I would take that leap and how I would support myself. So it wasn't really that nerve wracking to me, but everyone around me it was. So including my mother
Yeah, they
and
were
her
like, "What
father
you
for sure.
doing?"
Yeah, yeah. Like, hold up, brother.
Yeah, why
Yeah,
you leaving this
you got a
security to
great
go
job.
paint?
Yeah,
What you
yeah,
talking about? Yeah,
yeah, yeah. But no, like when I think, but passion and purpose is a real thing. So like when I spoke about art and when I expressed like my drive, my energy behind it, the questioning became lesser, right? It was like, oh, like you really about that life, like you're really
mm-hmm.
about to go do it, and so that was also cool to see, and that's when I also recognized that I could do it, is because I could see the people's demeanor change a little bit when I was talking about it as well. Yeah. So
Yeah. That I see that that's hard for a lot of people from a standpoint of that have jumped out on their own. They have a similar story, right? They started in corporate, it just didn't work. They were trying to express themselves creatively or whatever, and it just was, corporate is an interesting structure of how you move in that, and making that jump to doing your own thing. A lot of the times, like you said, family and the people closest to you are like, "What are you doing?" Was that hard to navigate, and did that take a long time to get them on board? Because I know that it's an interesting transition when you're close with your family and they're like looking at you like you're making a mistake.
yeah, they never made me feel like I couldn't do something, right? Like they were supportive enough. Now,
Mm-hmm.
I more so looked at it like I get it. It doesn't make sense to y'all, but there was
Mm-hmm.
never a. I luckily didn't experience like don't do that. Like that's not smart. Like they weren't ever talking down on me. It was more so just like I can tell you don't 100% get it, but you believe in me as your son, and that was kind of
That's
enough for
dope.
me. Yeah,
That's dope. That's dope. Sometimes you don't hear that. Sometimes parents be like, "You're stupid. What are you doing?"
yeah,
So
yeah,
to have that support, good
yeah.
parents will report.
And exactly, and I feel like after you leave the household and you've been out of it for a minute, um, the hope is that they're like you're an adult now, like you trust yourself, you trust your gut, and I wasn't yet supporting a family or anything like that. I was just trying to stay on my own 2 feet. So
Right.
any relationships I was in that weren't supporting me standing on my 2 feet, I just let them go, and I continue to find ways to navigate self.
Man, I love that. That is, it's definitely the time to do that. I definitely encourage folks that are in their, early 20s, whatever, like go figure it out. Like this is the time when you don't have the responsibilities, you don't have the stuff where you can go and mess up,
Yeah.
and kind of figure it out and build from there.
For
Um,
sure.
that's
Yeah,
dope. So you got this
real
mural
quick, brother.
project.
I think I
Yep.
lost you on the screen, but up there it is. We're back.
Okay, we good?
Yeah, yeah. Sorry. Yeah,
Okay, cool. It's all good. Yeah, sometimes it be tripping sometimes,
yeah. You're
but
good.
um, but yeah, the mural project, right? So you were wrapping that up right at the time when you were saying, okay, I'm done with this kind of corporate structure. What was that transition like? Because that's another big. I mean, that's a big transition going from a corporate gig, getting paid every 2 weeks, every month, whatever it is, on a consistent basis, to like having to figure it out on your own.
Yeah.
How was that? How was that transition for you?
Um, the transition right when it happened was I don't know. It felt so good that I didn't have a lot of worries. That sunk in a little later. But like when I first left, I was like, wow, like that was a milestone in itself. Just for me proving to myself, I said I was going to do something, and then I did it. So it was like, okay, like thank you God, thank you family, thank you everybody who's like gotten me to this point to give me enough courage and respect for myself to like actually take those type of leaps. So I was just thankful, like generally. I felt really happy, inspired, and like I was moving with a lot of tenacity. So like that first mural project, it was like the most I'd ever been paid on an art piece. So I was like, oh, like okay, like we can make a little money. You know what I mean? Like okay, and then I can give corporate a lot of credit for how I started navigating art and my success in the art world as well because I like took a lot of those systems and processes and like started
Mm-hmm.
applying it to self, like for my own job. I was like, okay, like here's all these things we had to think through to like hit our bottom line, like for this like massive global business. But like, what about like my small personal business? Some of those things still apply. So I felt prepared, but it was still nerve wracking to a certain extent. Once I started realizing that like people don't respect individuals as much as they expect large brands and corporations, which is kind of crazy. But that's like kind of the reality sometimes. You got to like really, I don't know, hold your own. Like it's kind of hard out here sometimes.
Yeah, navigating on your own is it's a whole different thing because everything is on you,
Yeah,
and I think that that's the biggest transition that people going from a corporate gig, or whatever it is to doing it on their own, like everything falls on you,
yeah,
and it's like it's a matter of, okay, I'm responsible for all of it, whether it goes good, whether it goes bad, and of course that there's higher power, God, like all of those things that like play a factor in it, of course. But there's in the things that you can control, you know, hey, are you gonna get up there and make the phone calls, make the connections, build the stuff, send the invoices? It's a lot of stuff to go with it.
yeah. No, absolutely.
Did did now from an entrepreneurial side of things and kind of combining the art, combining the stuff from the corporate side of things, did you have any background in kind of entrepreneurship? Like, was your family or anybody close to you kind of did it independently so you can use them as mentors? Did you have any mentors in that
um,
space?
and just entrepreneurship space in general.
Yeah, just people that just could help you navigate of like, hey, doing this on your own and how to, set stuff up. There's a lot of things you got to think about, taxes and,
Yeah,
like all that kind of stuff.
I like I learned about most things just on the journey. Like unfortunately, um, you could call it the hard way, or you could just call it learning from experience, I guess. But I will say I was inspired by like my grandparents. Like my grandfather, he was an entrepreneur. My grandmother, she owned like a florist, like Blossom Bouquet was a florist in Houston. So like I had seen entrepreneurship. I could never define like the joys of it, but I in my mind saw my grandfather as successful. I knew he was able to provide for his family through his entrepreneurship journey. So to me, I was like, okay, like that's possible. And then outside of that, I would say a lot of it is my grandfather. He's pretty hard headed, and also like just he's hard. He was always hard on us, right? Like so, I wasn't really going to him for advice, but I could see that like hard work will pay off. Basically, it was
Yeah.
kind of like what I was sticking to. But all the stuff you're talking about when it comes to business processes and taxes and finances and phone calls and meetings, I'm like, I was overwhelmed. I'm like, this is nuts. Like IRS wants how much?
Yeah.
Crazy.
I
And it
gotta
just
pay
felt
that
good.
now.
Yeah. Like, and coming from corporate, like, you don't even see them. Like, you're just like, oh, okay. Like, I had to pay taxes, and maybe I was getting a return early in my career. To be paying somebody and also
Yeah.
be out here alone was nuts to me. I was hard pill to swallow for a couple of years.
100%. And I think that when people, that's the thing too, that people don't understand that there's a lot of things that go with being on your journey. It's not about doing your craft, because a lot of people, will transition. Oh, I love making cakes. I love, designing this. I love doing that. But there's a whole other aspect of stuff that supports that to get you to have to, to be able to do what you're doing. And so, yeah, sometimes you got to learn the hard way. But I think with YouTube now, there's a lot of resources out there that I feel like are kind of helpful.
Yeah, no, for sure. Like resources, and then I also just like started realizing what I don't know and
Yeah.
became more likely to ask for help. Like, I was able to reach out to a family member who like does people's taxes, and I was like, "Oh,
That's
like,
dope.
what am I supposed to be doing?" And we hadn't talked in a long time, but he was already just on it. Like, "Oh yeah, like let me give you some game." And then, I started working with Bree. She handles like all operations like on our
Dope.
squad, so she started like helping me out with emails when I was like supposed to be in the lab creating, and then like Alexis, for example, there's different public requests, and I'm like, oh, how do I navigate that? So I think team is just super important. Eventually, obviously, I couldn't afford that in the beginning, but
Right.
eventually, as you're finding success, just not doing it alone if you don't have to.
Te-
Yeah,
Team is everything.
yeah.
And I'm assuming did your background in sports and team kind of help shift that of like understanding how important that was to build it all together?
Yeah, man, I think so. I mean, sport, I think, parents even realize this a lot of times. It's like, it's important for just like general development, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
life skills and like knowing how to talk and work with people and learning how to listen to coaching, um, understanding your ability to get better as a human. All those things are like sport skills. And so I give sport a lot of credit for how I move and how people around me start to move because if you have that in common, like you have sport in common, or you're even interested in it, you recognize what it takes to really have game. Like,
For sure.
yeah,
I think what's dope about these conversations and like kind of seeing your story and just kind of how it all transitioned is sometimes we don't see, we're in it every day, right? So we don't get to see the whole kind of picture, but being able to kind
yeah,
of look back at every little piece that you kind of talked about and experienced have gotten you to where you are today. And it's like everything that you went through and was like built from the sport, all that stuff transitions into what we're going to do in life, I feel like. And so it's cool to see these conversations and hear people's journeys to see how all these pieces kind of fit together and shape. And so I don't know, it's dope to
yeah,
hear how you've kind of navigated that entire process.
yeah, man, for sure. I mean, that's the beautiful thing about life, I guess. Like, I mean, none of us really know. Like, it's just like
Yeah.
these life experiences, like you said, that we have at an early age. They like shape who we are, how we navigate the world, and then we make decisions for better or for worse, and we like learn from them. Like it's like a
100%.
yeah,
It's it's pretty crazy, right? Because I feel like everything we go through in childhood, and I've been learning this more and more as I've been, I'm a huge advocate of therapy, right? I've been doing it for like about 2 years, right? It's been just kind of understanding and learning myself, and like you said, everything shapes our perspective from childhood. Some of the stuff that we don't even know or understand, and like it's operating in the background, and
yeah,
everything that we filter the world through is our perspective of how we grew up. And I think that like, and even going back to identity, right? I know that you talked about, and we talked about like identity and how does that change? How does that shift over stuff? And I think personally, I realized how important identity is, and how much that navigates every single thing of your life. How did you, I know that you were saying that going through the transition from finding the new identity with art and how it doesn't change overnight. How did that develop over time? Do you think that now you feel like that's very clear in terms of transitioning that identity and kind of where you are right now in life? Did it break up?
okay. Now, well, we're back. We're back. We're good.
All right.
How did it change over time? You
Just
said
yeah,
now you yeah.
yeah, the identity of changing over time, and how did it build and grow? Because like I said, so much of our childhood is based on how we see the world, and shifting our identity and how important that is.
Yeah. I mean, the process to me, I think I'm still processing like how the shift happened. I think um, it was a mind shift first, but then there was like this like truly convincing self that that's like a possibility. So like being like, okay, like you're good at art. That in itself didn't do it. Like that was like a that's a cool factor. That's like, oh, I have another skill set that not everyone knows I have, and I'd like to share that more. But the identity shift happened, I think, when I started immersing myself in the culture of like
Mm.
the street art community, doing murals that are like public works that were like reaching people who typically don't have access to art, doing shows for like free and like just like I don't know this was gonna take me, but like that was like me really living the life of the
Mm.
artist. And when I started living the life, I think that's what helped the identity shift over time. And that whole time I was like working corporate, but I was very intrigued by this life. And so as I was like going to all these shows and showing up in the community and, you know, almost dang near giving art away for the price I was selling it at, it was like, okay, I'm really a part of this like art life and felt part of the culture. And that's how my identity shifted. And then I remember I did my very first show. It was called Reborn. And to me, that show was symbolic because up until, I don't know, like through that point in college where I had that injury, I was very much so defined as an athlete and as a student. Like those two things together, that was it. And eventually I imagined myself working in sport, whether it was broadcasting or in marketing, sport, whatever it was. If I didn't play in the league, we were still going to be in sport. So for me to be completely pivoted away from that Reborn show, it was significant to me because I truly felt like I was reborn an artist. Like one identity, I literally left behind. Like I couldn't watch football for a while. I couldn't play around with hoops. Like I couldn't do anything sport related because I was just so it frustrated me that life of mine that I had to leave behind. And instead, I focused on what was bringing me joy, which was me being a a new original artist and creating new ideas for the people, basically. So
That's dope, man. I love that. So was that your process of, kind of, would you say like acceptance of it with that show?
yeah, I think so. Um, it was my it was. I remember I cried at that show. I was like trying to just thank all my friends and family for being in attendance. Um, I like paid for myself to go to Art Basel to do a show,
Mm.
to put my works on display for people I didn't know, and to just look around the room and see the support there, it brought me to tears. And in that moment, I was like, oh, like y'all see me the way that I see me now, and that was also validation for me. Yeah.
That's amazing, man. I think, yeah, life is weird, huh? Like it
Yeah.
just there's so many phases and processes and things that you need to learn, and it takes these like unexpected. It just takes these unexpected turns,
Yeah.
you know, and getting to those moments of acceptance of being reborn or things changing and shifting. I think that is just an incredible process. And I think that so many different people have different ways of how to get there. And
Mm.
so that's really dope that you like had this outlet to be able to create and then share with the world to just kind of bring it all full circle. I think that's
Yeah.
super dope.
No, thank you, man. I think it's I don't know. You mentioned just like the therapy of it all. That was my therapy, right? Like the art was the therapy. I even tried like the traditional methods. Like I think some of the staff recognized when I stopped playing football, like this kid's not well. Like, okay, like what can we do for him? And tried to help me explore traditional therapy. Like, let's talk to somebody. Like, open up. And I just couldn't do it. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
didn't know how to do it. Like my upbringing, that's not what we did. We just like fought through stuff. So,
Right.
so I was like, I don't need to talk to this woman across from me or man across from me that I don't know. That's how I saw it. And so I just, instead of doing that, I started communicating through the art. And now I'm in a very different position with therapy, and I view it completely differently. But at the time, as a young person, it didn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's definitely not. I think the stigma around therapy is you have to be crazy or something has to be wrong with you. And it's just like, nah, I'm strong. I could get through it by myself. I don't need this.
Yeah.
And so I think that there's a big stigma with that. And that was what changed for me. I was like, oh, if I want to be better and be my best, this is going to help me get there and figure out my triggers and why I do certain things. I don't know what your experience with therapy is now or what it has been, but what have you found that's changed from when you were younger and looking at it versus now and how, kind of how it's helped you?
Mm. Um, what's changed is um, being one, going back to our earlier points of like knowing your identity, right? Like I'm what's changed is like I know who I am like at this point. And at the time I first started exploring therapy, I had no idea who I was going to become because I lost the thing that I identified with, which was probably worth talking about, right? Like in retrospect, like that would have been a perfect time for therapy. But I think, yeah, what's changed is I recognize, to your point, is like it makes you better, right? And like saying things out loud, admitting things, also looking at the people around you, like how do my actions and behaviors and shortcomings affect them? Um, I started like building a relationship with my now fiance, right? And I'm just like, oh, like I never before was thinking about how to be better for someone else. I was thinking about how to make myself the best. And when I started thinking that way, therapy started making more sense also. It's like, oh, like for her to understand me, I got to understand self. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think that's how it's changed. And it's also just the world has also changed, right? Like in some ways, even our community has become a little softer, right? Like and more open and intelligent about these like methods that can help us and help us heal. So for me, that helps also is like having brothers around you or sisters around you who are like, this is like what I'm doing, and like hearing about those experiences and like being more open to trying these different ways of healing and also creating spaces for that through my art as well.
That's powerful. That's just powerful because yeah, so many people, so many of us deal with these challenges and don't say anything about it. And
Yeah.
so for me, I was like, damn, why am I so like messed up in my head about it, like, and all this stuff. And everybody seems to be okay and doing this. But then I realized, I'm like, oh, everybody's dealing with it. They just not communicating with it. And it may not be, of course, the same thing that they're dealing with, but
Yeah.
everybody's dealing with something and multiple things. And it could be fixed. Your mind is the operating system that it powers your entire life and your whole perspective. And I think, I don't know, I think something that hit me recently was um, my mom has been in AA in her life. You know, she had trouble with alcohol and stuff like that. So she's been like over 20 years sober or whatever. But she used to
Yeah.
always say the
Amazing.
like serenity prayer, right? Like,
Hmm.
Lord, give me the strength to accept the things that I cannot change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And I think it's something that I wrote, and it just kind of hit me differently recently, where it was like, there's some things about you that you just can't change and you just have to accept it, right? And there's some things that you can develop in, and really trying to know the difference between those, because it'll impact everything. And like you said, everybody around you, right? There's one thing to become better yourself, but then when you start to look at stuff, I mean, even if you're being honest, you start thinking that, back in the day, you'd be like, oh, it was their fault. Then you start going to therapy. You're like, oh, damn, okay, there might have been a little bit of me
Yeah.
in there.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you're being honest with yourself,
Yeah. And
So
start
I think
understanding
it's an
your
important
role.
conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's incredible, man. If you could, man, if you just repeat what the prayer that you said your mom typically
Yeah,
typically says.
I'll pull it up so I don't
No,
butcher it. I'll have it the
no,
same
no,
thing,
no.
but
It just sounded great, like just coming out of your mouth. You don't have to have it right now. I just thought what your words
it's
were.
no, I have it right here because I literally just wrote it yesterday,
Yeah,
and it was something that was very important for me to kind of process and look at. And she's been telling me this forever, right? I've heard this for a very long time.
yeah.
But for some reason recently, it was just understanding that there's certain things that you can't change. And so it says, Lord, grant me the strength to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
Mm.
And it's just a powerful thing of like, we could control and change a lot of things in our life more than we give ourselves credit. But there are certain things that you just can't change, stuff that happened to you growing up, whatever, you just can't. And being able to be okay and accept that is, I feel like, the secret to finding peace in life,
Yeah, yeah.
from my
No,
perspective and what I'm
absolutely, man.
learning in
That's
my journey.
powerful for
Yeah.
sure.
I appreciate it. It's something that was sitting with me. But yeah, man, I'm yeah, this is just dope. I just love these conversations and talking with folks about this, because it's just I feel like it's such an important topic of being transparent, being vulnerable about stuff, and being able to have these real conversations, and people
Hmm.
can like, oh, okay, I could relate to that. And so I'm just really inspired by your story and kind of your journey, and just even your art and your take on how you communicate things. Like, I could feel it through Instagram, like the stuff that I see and how you do stuff, it has a feeling to it. Like, you can feel it. And I think that is something that's just really dope from people that are creative and that can create stuff. And so I'm just interested to see what is next for you. What does 2024 have in store? What is your kind of mindset at with where you are now?
That's a great question. For me, it became more simple this year. In previous years, I've tried to write everything out to like, I got hit this specific goal, then hit this specific goal. And this year, I kept it simple, and it's just like moving with intention. Um,
Hmm.
and like my selection process for like what I'm doing and what I'm working on is just very much intentional, right? Like that's down to personal projects I take on, people I work with, brand partners, collaborations, all of it. It's just like asking myself questions this year, like why am I doing that? Versus in the first several years of maybe being a full time creator, an artist, it was a hustle, like it still is, but it was whatever came across my table. I'm like, sounds good. find a way to get it done. I'll make it happen. And it really drained me, right? Like, although I was happy with what some of the things we were able to achieve, at the end of the day, like not feeling good and not feeling healthy and well is not it. So that's this year right now. When like what's upcoming is just I'm working on a personal project right now where it's like a collection of works that's actually diving into therapy in a way, right? Like, what are the things that like I skip all the time and I never talk about, or like the parts of my childhood that are so beautiful and can connect to other people. You know, what is it? What is my transition from athletics to my career now like really look like? How does it feel? And not all of it has to be so literal, but just like again, continuing to communicate through art. That's what's next for me right now, and then all the partners I'm working with right now feel good, right? Like, I got off a call earlier today that was like, you know, with some upcoming brand partners that I was like, wow, like everyone's in alignment, everyone's on the same page, and I haven't had that experience the past few years, so I needed that. Yeah,
Yeah, that's important.
yeah,
So tell me about this personal project a little bit more. What is this going to consist of? That sounds super dope.
yeah. So,
I don't know how
so
much you could share.
Yeah, like no, I can share as much as I can come up with in my head. Like I've written it all out, so I'm not reading word for word, but a lot of it has to do with like selfhood, right, and like the exploration of self, but with the intention of connecting those stories to people, like shared experiences, right? Like
Mhm.
a lot of us like sport. Like we have like this like thing in common that we can like talk about sport. We can talk about the impact of sport. A lot of people have that. So like taking sport as a topic, for example, putting like showing how it showed up in my life, and I'm almost 100% positive that it showed up for someone else in that way. And so that's kind of what the collection of works is all about: is being more vulnerable and telling my own story truthfully and like very authentically. I think up to this point in my art career, I've told my stories, but it's kind of hidden. Like
Mhm.
it could come to life even through a female face, for example. Like, oh, she had a similar experience as me. I'm gonna paint her, and so it won't. Nobody will even have any idea
Mhm.
that this painting was about me. You know what I mean? Um, so that's kind of what this collection is going to be. Us being more open, vulnerable, and connecting these like stories. And I think one of the other topics that I'm trying to explore in there as well is like code switching. And that
Mhm.
goes back to the authenticity piece. Is like throughout life and navigating all these spaces we talked about, whether it be sport in Texas, and being black in that space, right? Um, Northwestern University, corporate, all these different spaces where you learn how to navigate. And like when you look back, I'm like, how much was I like truly my authentic self throughout that entire time? And did I feel safe to do that? And so that's like some other things I'm exploring as well. Just 'cause I think it's worth utilizing my craft again as therapy.
That's dope. So is this going to be a show, or how's that? How
Yeah.
are you thinking about
A
doing this?
show. Some of it will kind of think about it like music, right? Like some of it's like singles, some of it will be an album. So like I'll come out with just like as I finish certain pieces, if I feel like they can live alone, we'll put more artwork out that way. And then I do have a show in July. It's at the Epiphany Center for Arts in Chicago. So it's like right across from the United Center, where the Bulls play, which is dope. And so I'm looking forward to that. That'll kind of be when the album, if you will, comes out, the
Yeah.
collection. I'll have an exhibit and it'll be a solo show. So that's exciting. And because I haven't really put together a full collection of work with a cohesive storytelling feel since like 2019. Like, so
That's dope.
yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
I love that. So is it going to be the whole month of July?
It'll be July through September or October.
Okay.
So yeah, it will last a few months, and my goal is that with that is to show up in Chicago, like where I typically have. But um, I'm really trying to be intentional also about showing up back home in Houston, showing up in LA, which is like kind of my future. with my fiance right now. So like thinking about those things as well as like how do I start building community in these other places that are really important for me.
I love it. Well, I want to come to the show, so
Oh man, that would
I'll
be
be there.
love,
That
bro.
sounds dope. No,
Yes, yes.
100%,
I appreciate that, for
for sure.
real.
Well, man, this has been a dope conversation. Again, I know I keep saying it, but super inspired by your work. I'm very excited to see how the show comes together this year, in July, and just how your whole career develops. I love the what you said about the intentions this year and making sure the alignment is there.
Hmm.
I think that that's such a big, important piece of it is making sure that the stuff is aligned. And so, yeah, I just appreciate you sharing your journey and being open and transparent with everything, and excited to see what you have next.
Absolutely, man. Thank you. And thank you for having me today, man. I think it was a super fruitful conversation. I enjoyed it a lot, so I'm glad you did as well. And hopefully we can continue the conversation because back to alignment, I feel like there's a lot of alignment here. So thankful.
100%. Now, this is just the beginning.
Yeah, yeah,
This is just
absolutely.
the beginning.
Cool,
All right.
cool.
I appreciate you.